essential for living.
Hi there, I'm James, your O2 guru. How can I help you today?
Hi, James. Can you tell me about the O2 network?
Alright, there's a lot to tell you. Where do I start?
I've always wanted to know how a network actually works.
Right, okay, well, let's start with how you get a signal, or coverage as we call it. If you take a map of the UK, you'll find lots of our mobile masts dotted around. Each of these masts has its own coverage footprint, transmitting and receiving signals for the devices within it.
So how does my phone connect me to my friends in other coverage footprint areas?
When you call a friend, your phone converts your voice from sounds to digital ones and zeros, and then transmits those ones and zeros to the mast via electromagnetic waves. And then from there, the digital signal gets routed to a mast in the cell where your friend's phone is. Sometimes this has to go via our core network, or the brain of our network, to check things like the security of the connection. Their phone picks up that signal and converts it back into speech again.
And what about if I'm on the phone whilst moving between coverage footprint areas, like in a car or on a train?
Good question. This is why we need to make sure our masts are close enough to each other so the coverage overlaps, but only very slightly. If they overlap too much, the signals may interfere and impact the sound of your call. That means the signal to and from your phone switches between masts smoothly and won't drop out. But for that to happen, those masts need regular testing and adjustment. We call this network optimization, the sound of your call. Network optimization.
So that explains phone calls. What about when my phone shows I'm connected to 4G, but my apps work slowly?
Okay, so you're talking about network capacity. And to understand that, we'll need to learn a bit more about the electromagnetic waves we use to transmit and receive signals. The technical name for these waves is spectrum, and it's auctioned off by Ofcom to each of the operators. So if an operator has lots of spectrum, their network will be able to hold a lot of digital traffic for customers to make calls, send texts, and use their apps quickly. However, spectrum isn't an infinite resource, and it'll eventually be used up if there are too many customers using our network in one area. When that happens, your apps will run more slowly. Think of it as the difference between driving at speed along a nice empty road and getting stuck in a rush hour traffic jam where you'll still be moving, but more slowly because there's so many other cars in front of you holding you up. That's why we have to be careful with how we use our spectrum, so we can give you and every other O2 customer the best experience possible.
That makes sense. How do you use your spectrum then?
Well, it's all to do with the different frequencies we have and the way they act in different environments. For example, if the spectrum frequency is low, the signal transmitted by the mast will travel further in distance and further into buildings through walls. So it's great not just for rural areas, but also in cities where there tend to be lots of buildings.
And high frequency?
The higher the frequency, the more the amount of people will be able to use our network in that area and with a faster connection. Think back to the traffic analogy earlier, where you're stuck in a traffic jam because there are so many cars on the road. A mast which uses high frequency spectrum will be like a motorway with more lanes. That's why it's great for busy urban areas where lots of people are trying to get signal from the same masts at the same time.
So why don't you just use high frequency spectrum everywhere?
Well, as great as it is providing better signal to more people, it only travels a short distance, fading quickly and more easily, blocked by things like buildings, trees, even bad weather. That's why it's not great in the countryside and better in places where we can build lots of masts close together, like in cities.
I don't remember seeing lots of masts in cities.
Oh well, if you look hard enough you will, but they're not the kind of tall masts you'd see out of town. See, not only do these high traffic, high frequency masts have to be much closer together in cities, but visually they also have to fit in with the way the buildings look. And that's why we use what's called small cell technology. It's like normal masts, but much smaller.
How much smaller?
Oh, I'd say about the size of a shoebox. So you've got to look very carefully for our masts dotted around the city, but they're definitely there. For example, you might spot one if you take a closer look at the top of phone boxes or tube station signs.
And out of town, in the countryside, how do you make sure your customers get the best signal?
Okay, so we at O2 have been investing millions to bring 4G connectivity to as much of the countryside as possible. But there's always more to do. So we've joined forces with other mobile operators to share masts in rural areas under an agreement called the Shared Rural Network. And this is going to bring